Have you ever wanted to be a famous hero? How about a terrifying villain? Well, after today, you can do just that with these few additions to your D&D game. Hello role-playing gang, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Zach. I'm a forever DM, and my goal is to make D&D super fun and easy to understand. In today's system update, we're going to be exploring a new way to handle player reputations that will give real consequences to your actions. Your actions alone will determine whether NPCs love you or hate you. So let's jump into the general rules. Okay, so to begin with, reputation is on a sliding scale from a -10 to a +10. All characters will begin at 0. If your score is a -10, you are considered the most feared and hated villain in all of the land, and pretty much considered irredeemable. But if your score is a +10, you are considered a paragon of good and almost seen as incorruptible. Now, before I get into the effect your reputation has on NPCs, there's a couple of rules worth mentioning. First of which is disguises. Now, player reputation is not affected while that player is disguised. It should go without saying that if you are using a disguise kit, an illusion, wearing a mask, or something like that when you commit a crime, then you take it off, people don't know you're the one who committed that crime. However, a DM may opt to create a secondary reputation track for your alter ego. For example, if you go around the countryside robbing every single place you walk into wearing a black mask, then a reputation will begin to grow for this character known as the Black Mask. Now, if it ever gets out broadly enough that you are the Black Mask, then your reputation tracks will collide. But as a general rule of thumb, if it's possible that people don't know you are the one who committed a crime or did a good act, then you don't get the effects of that. If you are running around giving charitable donations to every church that you go to, that's great, but it's not going to affect your reputation track if no one knows you're the one doing it. Now, when you first create a character, your reputation starts at 0, but this may be adjusted by a factor of 1 in either direction based on your background. If you play as a criminal or a charlatan background, for example, you may choose to start with a -1 in your reputation track. Likewise, if you choose to play a noble or an acolyte, you may start your character with a +1 in your reputation track. Now, all the other backgrounds could kind of lean either way, positive or negative, so make sure to discuss your character's backstory with your DM and talk with them about where you should start. Now it's time we get into the effects that your reputation has on NPCs. Starting at 0, you gain no benefit or detriment to your gameplay. So at -3 reputation with any faction, you are considered an enemy of that faction. You may make a persuasion or deception check to try to convince them that you're someone else with a reputation of 0. Unfortunately, you gain disadvantage on those persuasion and deception checks because your face has already been plastered around town and people have a good idea of who you are. If you're caught, you'll likely have to pay a fee if crime was involved with your loss of reputation. At a -5, you are considered wanted by that faction. If you're caught, you could face jail time and even a loss of items. Unless you're disguised, members of this faction are definitely going to know your face, and they're going to try to get guards to throw you in jail. Once your reputation hits a -10, you are vilified. This faction wants you dead. Everyone in that faction either hates you or fears you. At this point, you are unable to purchase any goods from anyone in the faction. You can't use your persuasion or your deception to convince them otherwise unless you are disguised. However, because you are so feared, you gain advantage on all intimidation checks with that faction. Now, unfortunately, because your actions do have consequences, even if you want to backpedal and try to get on the good foot with that group, once you reach a -10 in your reputation track with a given faction, it is impossible to increase your reputation back to above a -5. Basically, whatever you did was so heinous that these people are pretty much going to dislike you permanently. At this point, you have basically achieved arch-villain status. Everyone's afraid of you, everyone hates you, people flee or cower at your name. You've done some terrible things, and you're probably pretty proud of it. To reach a -10 in the reputation track means a history of repeatedly awful things. If you're playing a villain campaign, maybe that's your thing. Now let's go in the opposite direction. Let's look at what happens when you go positive on your reputation track. At a +3, you are considered an ally of that faction. You get advantage on charisma checks versus NPCs from that faction, and in addition, you get discounts from shops and maybe a little extra gold from some of the quests you do. At a +5 reputation, you are respected. You're generally considered an asset to that faction and treated as such. In addition, you are given a special item to mark you as someone of high standing with that faction. This could be something as small as a pin you wear on your chest, or a magic sword that sets you apart as a special knight of the order. Once your reputation hits a +10, you are glorified. Everyone in the faction wants to be best friends with you. Everyone wants to be liked by you. You're basically famous. They'll offer you gifts, services, and deals that no one else in that faction could get. Most charisma checks with the faction are trivialized at this point, and any news besmirching your name is generally dismissed unless there's a mountain of evidence against you. So now that you can see the positive and negative effects of having reputation in your games, it's time to talk about when to change your reputation. In general, reputation changes are up to the dungeon master, though it is recommended that you don't change them too often. For example, each time a player or a group finishes a quest for a given faction, their reputation should increase by 1. Likewise, each time a player or group commits a crime against a faction, their reputation should decrease by 1. Now, these changes in reputation should scale according to your reputation level. Committing a spree of petty crimes around town shouldn't really lower your reputation below a -3. But committing a spree of random murders around town would have much more dire consequences. The more people that are witness to your deeds should also impact how quickly you move up and down this scale. Killing a noble in broad daylight or blowing up a building can drop you down to a -5 instantly. Just make sure to pace your reputation accordingly. And remember that a -10 is as bad as it gets. -10 is kill on sight, so don't throw that around willy-nilly. Likewise, a +10 might make you more popular than the ruling leader of that faction. So make sure you adjust accordingly and use a little finesse as you get higher and higher. Now, each player's reputation has a certain area of influence. The hero of a small fishing village likely won't be known by people in the capital. And likewise, the royal knight from the capital likely won't be known by travelers from another plane. Each player has a certain area of influence in which their reputation can spread. This can be a great thing for criminals on the run, or a negative thing for people whose reputation usually garner them special treatment. A player's area of influence is proportionate to their reputation score, whether good or bad. With a reputation of + or -3 with a group, that reputation spreads to the group's allies. With a + or -5, your reputation likely spreads to the country that faction is located in. With a + or -7, your reputation may spread to everyone on the continent, or at least as far as word can reasonably travel. Once you get to + or -10, your reputation very well may go beyond the realm. Now, gaining or losing reputation with a faction can have an impact on how other factions view you. As I stated before, once your reputation reaches + or -5, it begins to spread to allies of that faction. However, the opposite is also true. If two factions are at war with one another, your positive influence with this group will eventually become a negative influence with this group. So be mindful of this when you're choosing who you want to ally yourself with. Now, someone with a negative reputation with a given faction still has a road to redemption. This could involve fines, jail time, community service, or other actions. The actions required and the amount of reputation regained is entirely up to the DM in this scenario, as it may vary from faction to faction. But remember, once you reach a -10, it is impossible to get your score above a -5. In some cases, a faction may have no interest in anything other than your death. So the next time you're about to blow up a village with fireball, maybe consider the consequences. Now, if you've made it through this whole video and you're thinking to yourself, wow, this makes the game so much more interesting, then go ahead and check out that video I made where I talk about how we fix boring RPG combat. Thanks for watching.